Spain is a nation deeply proud of its Sephardic roots. When we speak to the people of Israel, we speak to a people of brothers and sisters, a people who, when they return to Spain, to Córdoba, Toledo, Seville, Barcelona, and so many other places, come home. This was the spirit behind the 2015 law, which was passed with broad consensus, granting Spanish nationality to descendants of Sephardic Jews originally from Spain. It is for this reason, and it is so difficult for us to understand, that we are so pained by the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. We therefore cry out, we implore, we demand, stop this massacre now. No more deaths in the name of a people that is so wise and ancient, who have suffered so greatly throughout history. Let us be clear. We unequivocally condemn the heinous terrorism of Hamas, especially the brutal massacre of the 7th of October 2023 against the Israeli population, and we recognize Israel's right to self-defense. But with equal strength, we demand that the Israeli government fully uphold international humanitarian law throughout Gaza and the West Bank. We demand that humanitarian aid be delivered without delay, that a ceasefire be established with guarantees, and that all hostages still held by Hamas be released immediately. The international community must shoulder its responsibility to achieve as soon as possible a viable solution that would include the existence of two states. The recognition of the State of Palestine by an increasing number of member states of this organization, to which Spain added its voice this past May, must contribute to achieving a just and definitive regional peace based on the implementation of United Nations resolutions and on the universal recognition of the State of Israel. President, delegates, as we know, many conflicts are both caused by and result in resource scarcity, state fragility, and inequality. The gap between current realities and the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda remains vast, and the current funding shortfall for sustainable development exceeds $4 trillion per year. The call for efficiency and resource optimization made at the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development that we held recently in Seville must be sustained. Accordingly, Spain, in line with the consensus-based commitment adopted there, has launched the Seville Plan for Support to Multilateralism. We have increased our contributions to international development funds, and we have reaffirmed our commitment to defending human rights, gender equality, and the environmental transition, which are central and distinctive elements of our foreign policy. Allow me to briefly address each of these three areas. First, human rights. Spain is, as of this year, a member of the Human Rights Council, enabling us to continue advancing causes such as the fight against racism, the abolition of the death penalty, and the promotion of economic, social, and cultural rights, while at the same time persisting in the struggle against all forms of discrimination. Because we support plural, open societies in which all citizens participate, and we are concerned by the erosion of democracies, the growing disaffection towards values that are essential to democratic coexistence. In these confusing times, which are testing our capacity for dialogue, we must remain steadfast in our commitment to these values. In harmony with these principles, we believe that immigration, when properly managed, is a vector of mutual development for countries of origin, transit, and host countries. We believe that the human rights of migrants must therefore be the principal reference for our actions. Therefore, we fully support the implementation of the Global Compact on Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees. Secondly, I wish to refer to gender equality. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is therefore a fresh opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to real and effective equality. This is not merely a step forward in human rights, but above all, a matter of justice. Spain aspires to remain a global beacon in areas such as sexual and reproductive rights, the fight against sexual and gender-based violence, and the increased participation of women in leadership roles and in decision-making processes. Third, the environment. The triple planetary crisis that we are facing, climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, demands strengthened governance and sufficient resources to accelerate a just energy transition. This must enable us to triple renewable energy capacity, double energy efficiency, and to continue decarbonizing our economies. These are goals that are as ambitious as they are essential, and doubt must be completely excluded from the equation here. Spain calls for consensus and ambition ahead of COP30, which will be held in Brazil this November. There are other just as important challenges, including managing the impact of the transformative revolution known as artificial intelligence, which can accelerate progress on the 2030 agenda if we know how to direct it towards a fair and equitable digital transformation. And in health, the global dimensions of which were tragically evident during the recent COVID pandemic, we welcome here the consensus reached on the pandemic agreement. This strengthens the central role of the World Health Organization within the global health architecture. Madam President, Spain's foreign policy is built around three fundamental axes based on geography, history, and conviction. These are towards Africa and the Mediterranean, towards the Americas and the Atlantic, and towards Europe. I would like to share some thoughts on these three areas. Spain is well aware that Africa represents a strategic global interest of the highest order. The present is marked in certain countries by structural deficiencies and some brutal conflicts and wars that receive insufficient attention when compared with others that I've already referred to. Here I'm referring to numerous peacekeeping operations in the region to which Spain contributes decisively. This is the case in Western Sahara, where Spain will continue to support the Secretary General's personal envoy in seeking a solution that is acceptable and consistent with UN norms and frameworks. Africa's future will be shaped by a young, dynamic, and proactive population that is increasingly engaged in global affairs. That's the future that we must support. Spain has therefore adopted the Spain-Africa Strategy 2025 to 2028. We want to develop a partnership based on concrete action and shared interests, and to promote vibrant African multilateralism embodied by the African Union and other sub-regional organizations. Strictly bilaterally speaking, I must mention the special relationship of neighborliness and cooperation that binds us to the Kingdom of Morocco, which in recent years has been revitalized to the benefit of our peoples. Latin America and the Caribbean represent for Spain a community of kindred nations, an irreplaceable part of our identity strengthened by shared heritage, that is, the Spanish language, spoken by 600 million people around the world. Spain holds the pro tempore secretariat of the Ibero-American Community of Nations until the end of 2026, and Madrid will hold the next Ibero-American Summit. We will continue to support the EU's engagement in the region, which will culminate this year in the EU-CELAC Summit that will be held in Colombia next month, November. The European Union is one of the greatest achievements of concord and a model for multilateralism. Its voice is more necessary than ever in these times. We therefore advocate for a union that is increasingly effective, cohesive, secure, and competitive on the global economy. I think it's important to recall that on the 11th of June this year, we launched a definitive political agreement regarding the key aspects of the future accord between the European Union and the United Kingdom. This was a historic agreement that respects Spain's position on sovereignty and jurisdiction over Gibraltar, which will bring confidence, legal certainty, and stability to the lives of the populations of the Campo de Gibraltar and Gibraltar itself. Madam President, I began speaking about the past and present of the United Nations, and I shall dedicate my last few words to its future. In these times of severe budgetary constraints, I call on all member states to reaffirm their commitment to this organization. I encourage all of its personnel, led by the Secretary-General, to persist in their enormous efforts towards efficiency and effectiveness, prioritizing those areas whose neglect would represent an unacceptable breach of the ethical standards that must always guide their work. We continue to believe in the need to advance reform initiatives, and we offer our capacity for dialogue and consensus building, as well as our firm multilateral conviction in this endeavour. On this 80th anniversary, which coincides with the 70th anniversary of Spain's accession to the organisation, I wish, Madam President, to renew my country's recognition of all of the men and women working within the United Nations. You are the custodians of the memory of the 20th century and the guardians of the hopes invested in the 21st. And it is now, when so many questions are surrounding multilateralism and cooperation, that we need you most. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the King of Spain. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam Chair, Deputy Secretary. Dear leaders, dear friends, and all those who can become our friends, because you want safety and peace just as much as we do. Today, no one but ourselves can guarantee security. Only strong alliances, only strong partners, and only our own weapons. The 21st century isn't much different from the past. If a nation wants peace, it still has to work on weapons. It's sick, but that's the reality. Not international law, not cooperation. Weapons decide who survives. Excellencies, you know perfectly well international law doesn't work fully unless you have powerful friends who are truly willing to stand up for it. And even that doesn't work without weapons. It's terrible, but without it, things would be even worse. There are no security guarantees except friends and weapons. No Ukrainian choice this kind of reality. And knowing our people, they would have chosen a different priority. Ukrainians are peaceful people, but they are people who want to live freely in their own independent country. That's why we invest in defense. For many nations, there is simply no other way left. Nations can speak about their pain from stages like this, but even during bloodshed, there isn't a single international institution that can truly stop it. That's how weak these institutions have become. What can Sudan or Somalia or Palestine or any other people living through war really expect from the UN or the global system? For decades, just statements and statements. And even everything happening in Gaza remains without a way out. Even now, Syria, after all the changes, still has to appeal to the world to ease the sanctions that are choking its economy. It has to ask and wait. Syria deserves stronger support from the international community. And as Russia's war against my country goes on, people are still dying every week. Yet there is no ceasefire because Russia refuses. Russia abducted thousands of Ukrainian children, and we have brought some of them back. And I thank everyone who's helped. But how long will it take to bring all of them home? Childhood slips away faster than adults are able to help. Look at Israel. Nearly 2 years have passed and hostages still haven't been freed. They must be freed, but even that still hasn't happened. And for years, there have been no real answers to other threats, either chemical weapons and famine used as a weapon. Last year, at this assembly, I warned the world about the risk of radiation disasters, especially due to Russia's occupations of our Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe, but nothing's changed. Nothing's. And yesterday, the plant went into blackout again, and Russia hasn't stopped shelling even in areas near a nuclear facility. And because of international institutions are too weak, this madness continues. Even being part of a long-standing military alliance doesn't automatically mean you are safe. Just recently, 19 simple Russian drones violated Polish airspace, and only 4 were shut down. Luckily, they were not shaheeds or even worse. Otherwise, the results would have been horrific. Estonia had to call a UN Security Council meeting for the first time in history because Russian fighter jets deliberately entered its airspace. Moldova is defending itself again from Russia's interference. We are helping Moldova, and Russia's trying to do to Moldova what Iran once did to Lebanon. And the global response, again, not enough. We have already lost Georgia in Europe. Human rights and the European nature of the state system are only shrinking there. Georgia is dependent on Russia. And for many, many years, Belarus has also been moving toward dependence on Russia. Europe cannot afford to lose Moldova too. It's important to remember how the world once ignored the need to help Georgia after Russia's attack, and how the moment was missed with Belarus. How Moldova must not be lost. And for Europe, supporting Moldova's stability is not costly, but failing to do so will come at a much higher price. That's why the EU needs to help Moldova now with funding and energy support, not just words or political gestures. We must not forget about protecting the rights of people and the rights of nations in regions where these rights are under threat. The UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights must apply everywhere. But the Taliban in Afghanistan dragged a whole country back into the dark ages. Cartels in some Latin America countries are more powerful than the government there. This is all about collapse of international law and the weakness of the international institutions. And so it's about the rise of weapons. Weapons decide who survives. Excellencies, yesterday President Trump stood right here in this hall, and God saved him from a murder attempt during the campaign. A shot was fired from a rifle, and just a fraction of an inch saved his life. Just days ago, President, along with hundreds of thousands of Americans, honored the memory of Charlie Kirk. Sadly, his life was cut short by a bullet. Once again, violence with a rifle in hand. We also mourn the Ukrainian woman, Irina Zarutska. She was brutally killed with a knife here in America, the very country where she was seeking refuge from Russia's war. And almost every day when we open the news, we see headlines about violent attacks happening all around the world. Most of it is done with weapons. People are already used to, but weapons are evolving faster than our ability to defend ourselves. Now, there are tens of thousands of people who know how to professionally kill using drones. Stopping that kind of attack is harder than stopping any gun, knife, or bomb. This is what Russia has brought with its war. It used to be that only the strongest countries could use drones because they were expensive and complex. Now even simple drones can fly thousands of kilometers. War tech doesn't care about geography anymore. It's now reshaping it. Just recently, airports in Europe had to shut down because of drones. Authorities couldn't even say what kind of drones they were, who sent them, or from where. Last week, North Korea announced the test of a tactical strike drone. That means even countries with limited resources can now build weapons that are dangerous to their neighbors. Ukraine and nations like Saudi Arabia know all too well how dangerous Iranian attack drones are. But what happens when all the types of drones become available, even to small terrorist groups or cartels? The world moves too slowly to protect itself, and weapons move fast. Now companies are already working on drones that can shoot down other drones, and it's only a matter of time, not much, before drones are fighting drones, attacking critical infrastructure and targeting people all by themselves, fully autonomous and no human involved except the few who control AI systems. Dear leaders, we are now living through the most destructive arms race in human history, because this time includes artificial intelligence. And if there are no real security guarantees except friends and weapons, and if the world can't respond even to old threats, and if there is no strong platform for international security, will there be any place left on earth that's still safe for people? We need global rules now for how AI can be used in weapons, and this is just as urgent as preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. We need to restore international cooperation, real working cooperation for peace and for security. A few years from now might already be too late. 10 years ago, war looked different, and no one imagined that cheap drones could create dead zones, areas stretching for dozens of kilometers where nothing moves, no vehicles, no life. People used to imagine that only after a nuclear strike. Now it's drawn reality. Mass-produced, simple drones, and without AI yet. Ukraine doesn't have the big fat missiles dictators love to show off in parades, but we do have drones that can fly up to 2,000-3,000 kilometers. We had no choice but to build them to protect our right to life. Control over the sea used to depend on having a big navy. Ukraine doesn't have a big fleet, but we succeeded. In the Black Sea, we pushed what's left of the Russian Navy into remote base. And we did it with sea drones. That's how we protect our ports and maritime trade routes, because Russia has left us no other choice. And our spiderweb operation, when cheap drones destroyed or damaged dozens of expensive Russian strategic bombers, became a real example for special forces around the world of what new weapons can do to old systems. These very Russian bombers attacked our cities. And none of this would have happened if Putin had not started this full-scale aggression, full-scale war. And every year that this war goes on, weapons become even more deadly. And only Russia deserves to be blamed for this. Dear leaders, to protect lives, Ukraine builds underground schools and underground hospitals. To protect lives, we have to spend more on protecting power stations from drone and missile attacks than on building sports facilities or cultural infrastructure. Ukrainian farmers are learning how to protect their equipment from Russia's FPV drone strikes, and for them that challenge is far greater than climate change. Russia's war has put us in this situation, but do you have protection against similar threats? The facts are simple. Stopping this war now, and with it, the global arms race, is cheaper than building underground kindergartens or massive bunkers for critical infrastructure later. Stopping Putin now is cheaper than trying to protect every port and every ship from terrorists with sea drones. Stopping Russia now is cheaper than wondering who will be the first to create a simple drone carrying a nuclear warhead. So we must use everything we have together to force the aggressor to stop. And only then do we have a real chance that this arms race will not end in catastrophe for all of us. If it takes weapons to do it, if it takes pressure on Russia, then it must be done. And it must be done now. Otherwise, Putin will keep driving the war forward wider and deeper. And we told you before, Ukraine is only the first, and now Russian drones are already flying across Europe, and Russian operations are already spreading across countries, and Putin wants to continue this war by expanding it, and no one can feel safe right now. So first, we are now building a new security architecture for ourselves. More than 30 countries are already part of our coalition, and we are strengthening army, launching joint weapons production with partners, and defining financial commitments for defense in a way that could become a security model for any other nation. If security guarantees work for Ukraine, something more than just friends and weapons, it will mean that people were able to make national security not a privilege for a few nations, but a right for everyone. Second, we are ready to make our modern weapons become your modern security, your modern weapon. And we have decided to open up arms exports. And these are powerful systems tested in a real war when every international institution failed. And we are also ready to grow our defense production together with strong partners so that their protection is modern and reliable. You don't need to start this race from scratch. We are ready to share what has already proven itself in real defense. And third, many in the world are still relaxed. Still. But look at how many countries are here at this General Assembly. Countries that are at war or just came out of war or are trying to stop one or openly getting ready for one. War has already reached too many people to pretend it has nothing to do with you. So it depends on you. Whether you help peace or continue trading with Russia and helping Russia to fund this war, it depends on you. Whether prisoners of war will be freed, whether abducted children will come home, whether hostages will be free. It depends on you what will define existence, war like now or our joint strong actions as it should be. Yesterday we had a good meeting with President Trump, and I also spoke with many other strong leaders, and together we can change a lot. Of course, we are doing everything to make sure Europe truly helps. And of course, we count on the United States. I appreciate the support we are receiving. Yes, much depends on the G7 and G20, but in the end, peace depends on all of us, on the United Nations. So don't stay silent while Russia keeps dragging this war on. Please speak out and condemn it. Please join us in defending life and international law and order. People are waiting for action. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Ukraine.
L'Assemblée va
The Assembly will hear an address by His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II, Sovereign Prince of Monaco. I request protocol to escort His Serene Highness and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madame la Présidente de la...
Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 80 years ago, the creation of the United Nations marked a decisive turning point in contemporary history in international relations, offering each state a forum for dialogue and exchange. The ambition of the founders was clear and bold. All nations, large and small, need to be able to participate on equal footing in crafting collective solutions, equality, respect, dialogue. This is the heart of the multilateral spirit and underpinning the values where Monaco found its place within the concert of nations. Over these past 8 decades, the United Nations has supported and ushered in major turning points: the reconstruction of Europe after the Second World War, the process of decolonization, the hope of an international order that is more peaceful after the Cold War. The organization contributed to the establishment of robust international law, the adoption of numerous treaties, law of the sea, counter-terrorism treaties, protection of the environment, the promotion of human rights. Monaco ratified more than 270 of these treaties, which, beyond their symbolic dimension, govern the day-to-day lives of our population. The UN also played a key role in the maintenance of international peace and security. On all continents, these operations help to prevent conflict and to support democratic transitions. International justice, specifically through the judgments rendered by the International Criminal Tribunals, have been significant sources of progress in combating impunity for the gravest crimes, and the International Court of Justice remains a pillar when it comes to peaceful resolution of disputes. The United Nations has been a pioneer in ecological awareness, raising the protection of our planet, mobilizing governments scientists, civil society to put together concerted strategies, and these are issues which are of tremendous importance to us. The UN has shed light on the role of sports as a vector for peace, for inclusion, for development. Our principally welcomes the fact that sport is increasingly taking pride of place in the work of the organization. Madam President, we are cognizant of the progress that has been made over the past 8 decades, and yet we have more challenges to surmount, which requires resolute collective action. The progress that we have made is significant, but we have a grim reality. We are in a multipolar world where international realities are significant. There are proliferation of peacekeeping operations show that dialogue and preventive diplomacy, unfortunately, do not always generate the anticipated results. International security is today gravely imperiled. International tensions and conflicts are spreading in all 4 corners of the world, and this makes it all the more necessary for there to be a reaffirmation of the core principles of the United Nations: sovereignty of states, peaceful dispute resolution, respect for international law, and human rights. In this regard, the Principality of Monaco firmly condemns the war of aggression targeting Ukraine and the suffering this has inflicted upon civilian populations, and I reiterated this message just now to President Zelensky. I cherish the hope that a just and lasting negotiated peace agreement can be found soon to guarantee security and to rise to the expectations of the Ukrainian people. In the Middle East, violence has generated unacceptable human suffering casualties. The risk of regional conflagration requires that there be an immediate de-escalation, protection of civilians, the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance, and a sincere relaunch of the peace process on the basis of the 2 states. Peace is not a utopia. Peace is an overriding necessity. These security-related challenges are compounded by environmental challenges. The international community recently met in Nice for the 3rd UN Conference on Oceans, vehemently recalling the need to act for the protection of seas and oceans. The Principality organized, before the conference, a Blue Economy and Finance Forum. Heads of state, economic leaders, investors, philanthropists, development banks, NGOs, 1,800 participants arrived from nearly 100 countries, responding to the call to mobilize more financial resources to invest in a sustainable, regenerative blue economy. And yet, the commitments made notwithstanding, there are still challenges. BBNJ was adopted in January last, and this should lead us to implement immediately measures for the conservation and sustainable use of the diversity in the high seas. The fight against climate change is a responsibility, a historic responsibility. Acceleration of extreme events requires credible, immediate, financed responses. We are traversing a significant difficulties. There is science which is accessible, abundant, more reliable than ever before. The Paris Agreement, the 10th anniversary of which we are marking this year, provides a structured, transparent framework which should generate a robust trust among all stakeholders. This year, new nationally determined contributions have been published, and this is a reflection of the need to be more and more ambitious. I wish to recall that these ambitions are carry moral significance, particularly vis-a-vis young people and succeeding generations, but also, as was recently recalled by the ICJ in the advisory opinion. And in this regard, and in accordance with the new collective goal for financing, which was adopted in Baku last year, I decided that my country will double specific financing under climate agreements, and this is by 2028. Let us not forget that there's a need to invest in countering climate change, but there's a need to take into account the depletion of biodiversity throughout the world. COP17 and the Biological Diversity Convention, October 2026, will be held in Yerevan. This is a key opportunity to transform the commitments into reality, specifically when it comes to financing and meaningful protection of ecosystems. Madam President, we cannot pass over in silence the alarming setbacks in human rights, freedom, the repression of freedom, civil society, excessive use of force. These are all undermining the very basis of civilizations and are resulting in a loss of trust of citizens vis-a-vis systems. Women's rights are a key pillar for peace, for development, and for justice. 30 years after the Beijing conference, gender equality between men and women has still not been fully universally attained, and this remains a key priority, which is something we need to reaffirm. There's an urgent need to generate collective commitment to combat violence against women and girls and against all kinds of persecution which they endure, including in conflict-affected areas. No society can be prosperous if such inequality persists there. Likewise, no society can develop without taking care of its young population, because young people are not just the future of the world. Young people are the present. 30 years after the World Youth Program, it is incumbent upon us to raise the role of young people in discussions on the economy, civic life, access to education, employment, digital issues. This is not a privilege. This is a right. Madam President, public global health is a key. Non-communicable diseases are the main cause of premature deaths, and there's a need for cross-sectoral mobilization to address this challenge. I welcome the key role of the WHO with the global action against these diseases, but there's a need to move further to strengthen synergies among the stakeholders to improve the effectiveness of action, particularly among budgetary constraints. The fourth high-level meeting on this issue should generate new momentum to intensify prevention and to provide universal access to high-quality care. Madam President, the 80th anniversary of the United Nations offers an opportunity to breathe new life into multilateralism, to reform its operations, and to address the liquidity crisis. Reform of the United Nations should restore people's trust and to establish an effective structure based on core values. The United Nations is the only universal body which is capable of defending sovereignty of states and embodies the ideal of cooperation amongst peoples. But this is not only at the UN headquarters. There's specialized institutions, UNESCO, FAO, and IAEA, and many others. These all play a critical role by providing concrete support for environmental, educational, and social policies of states, helping them to fully meet their responsibility without duplication of mandates in New York. And let us recenter the work of our organization to focus on the priorities enshrined in the Charter. We need to rekindle a spirit of dialogue, the spirit of organization. The general debate should once again become this unique opportunity where leaders of the world listen to one another and seek to achieve a mutual understanding. The Principality of Monaco cherishes the hope that through reform, the UN will once again become the center with the harmonization of UN efforts for the maintenance of peace and security in accordance with Article 1 of our Charter. No state alone can resolve the crises plaguing our times. It's by sharing ideas, resources, and willingness that we can together build a future of peace, of lasting peace, because together we are better. Thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Sovereign Prince of Monaco.
l'Assemblée va en
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Masoud Pezeshkian, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Mr. Secretary General, Madam President, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year, and I quote, "Better Together, 80 years and more of peace, development, and human rights," unquote, is in truth a summons to solidarity and to a shared vision of a brighter future. Our religious conviction, as well as the call of the prophets, rests upon the equality of the rights of all human beings. That which renders man more worthy is piety, namely truthfulness, wisdom, purity, and benevolence. The bedrock of all divine religions and of the human conscience is this golden maxim: that which you would not approve for yourself, do not approve for others. Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, once said, "Act towards others as you